lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother, made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
For decades, the world has remained spellbound by the extraordinary life of Princess Diana, a woman whose warmth reshaped a monarchy and whose love for her sons defined her private world. Behind palace walls, beyond the flashing cameras, existed words never meant for history's eyes. Now, after years shrouded in silence, a deeply personal letter addressed to Prince William has finally surfaced. What truths did she leave behind? Do you think this letter changes how we see Diana's legacy? Yes or no? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold royal revelations. The hidden words that revealed Diana's quiet truth. Tucked away in the modest pages of a London auction catalogue in July 2004 was a discovery that seemed almost too ordinary to matter until it wasn't. Among the listings lay a collection of handwritten letters from Princess Diana, each one carrying a voice the world rarely heard, unguarded, deeply human, and quietly powerful. There were no grand announcements to draw attention, yet within those pages lived emotions that no royal speech had ever fully captured. These letters, addressed to a longtime family confidant, revealed a side of Diana untouched by ceremony. Long before the cameras and global admiration, she was simply a young woman finding her place in a life that moved faster than she could control. A note dated July 8, 1981, written just weeks before her wedding to Prince Charles, offered a glimpse into that whirlwind. While the world prepared for a historic event, Diana's tone remained unexpectedly calm, even playful, as if she were holding on to a small piece of normal life amid the storm.
I understood the media might be interested in what I did.
But what makes these letters linger in memory is not the wedding or the spectacle. It is the quiet evolution of her voice. Over time, the light-hearted remarks began to fade, replaced by reflection shaped by pressure, expectation, and emotional strain. Yet through every shift, one theme stood firm: her devotion to her children, especially Prince William. Her words about William carried a tenderness that felt both intimate and fiercely protective. They spoke of a mother determined to give her son warmth and stability, even as her own world grew uncertain. In these private lines, Diana was not the global icon or the people's princess. She was a mother, navigating joy and fear at once, holding tightly to the one role that gave her clarity. What stands out most is how different these letters feel from the carefully managed image presented to the public. There is no formality here, no polished phrasing, only honesty. They trace a journey from youthful excitement to emotional depth, revealing how quickly innocence can be reshaped by responsibility. And yet, even in the heavier moments, there is resilience in her tone, a quiet strength that refuses to disappear. Years after they were written, these letters continue to echo because they bridge the gap between myth and reality. They remind us that behind the headlines and royal traditions was a woman who felt deeply, loved fiercely, and struggled privately. In the end, what seemed like a simple auction listing became something far more lasting, a rare window into a life the world thought it already knew, but never truly understood. Princess Diana's letters revealed a side the world never saw, a devoted mother shaping her sons' lives with love and care. But what truths lay hidden in those pages, and how might they reshape the story we thought we knew about her life and legacy? Let's take a closer look. The letters that whispered. Diana's true legacy. Long before the world tried to define her through headlines and headlines alone, there existed a quieter truth, one written not for cameras, but for hearts that mattered most. Hidden within carefully folded pages, Princess Diana's letters carried a tenderness that no public appearance could fully capture. They revealed not a global icon, but a devoted mother, deeply invested in shaping the future of her two sons with warmth, empathy, and a sense of normal life that often felt out of reach within palace walls. Among these private exchanges, one note dated June 21, 1989, stands out with remarkable clarity. Written from Kensington Palace, it was addressed to Sergeant George Plum of the Special Escort Group. On the surface, it was a simple thank you message for arranging a motorbike display to celebrate Prince William's 7th birthday. Yet beneath those polite words lived something far more meaningful. Diana's gratitude felt genuine and unguarded as she described the joy the event brought, not only to William, but to other children and their mothers who shared in the moment. What made this letter unforgettable, however, was the presence of two small additions: the uneven, childlike signatures of William and Harry, scribbled beside their mother's name. In that detail, a rare and peaceful glimpse of family life quietly emerged. These letters, never intended for public view, offered a contrast to the carefully managed image of royal life. They told the story of a woman determined to raise her children differently. At a time when tradition often placed emotional distance between royal parents and their children, Diana chose closeness. She resisted the idea that privilege should come with isolation. Instead, she introduced William and Harry to a world beyond ceremony and expectation. Insights from those who stood close to her, including her former protection officer Ken Worf, helped deepen this understanding. Diana's approach was not symbolic, it was lived. She took her sons to places many would never expect to see members of the royal family. They visited amusement parks, stood in line for fast food, and even experienced public transport. These were not staged moments, but intentional choices. She wanted them to see, to feel, and to understand life as it truly was for others. Looking back now, these handwritten messages feel almost like quiet echoes of her values. They reignite conversations about her role within the royal family and her lasting influence on how modern royalty connects with the world. More importantly, they reveal a question that still lingers. In a life surrounded by tradition and scrutiny, was Diana quietly redefining what it meant to be both a princess and a mother? And did those small, heartfelt gestures shape the men her sons would one day become? Princess Diana defied palace conventions, giving Prince William and Prince Harry glimpses of ordinary life beyond ceremony. But what motivated her choices, and how did her quiet rebellion shape the prince's understanding of the world and the legacy they would carry into the future? Let's find out. The Letters That Whispered, A Mother's Truth. Princess Diana, Princess of Wales, was never content with raising her sons inside the polished stillness of palace life. Long before the world began to reflect on her legacy, she had already made a quiet decision to let Prince William and Prince Harry see beyond ceremony and tradition, into the ordinary rhythm of everyday life. She believed that titles should never replace understanding, and so she guided them into moments that felt real, even when the world around them was anything but. Years later, in 2004, a set of handwritten letters surfaced at an auction, drawing attention not because of their rarity, but because of their honesty. By then, William was no longer the small boy described in those pages. He had grown into a university student, carrying himself with a quiet composure that many believed echoed his mother's spirit. These letters, written in a tone free from royal formality, revealed something deeper than history. They revealed a mother thinking aloud, loving fiercely, and preparing her child for a future she knew would not be simple. What makes those words so powerful is not just what they say, but what they protect. Diana understood the force of public attention better than most. She had lived beneath it, felt its pressure, and learned how quickly it could shape a life. That is why she worked carefully with palace officials, allowing certain glimpses of school runs, family holidays, and small shared smiles to reach the public. In return, she fought quietly for something rare in royal life: space. Space for her sons to grow, to stumble, to discover who they were without constant judgment. This balance between openness and protection became one of her most defining choices. As later explored by Andrew Morton in Diana, Her True Story, her private reflections showed just how deeply she worried about the cost of exposure, especially for a child destined to live in the public eye. These were not distant royal concerns. They were the fears of a mother who had already endured too much herself. By the time the world revisited these letters, it had been 7 years since her death in 1997, a loss that still lingered in public memory. Yet the monarchy was changing, shaped in part by the path she had set. William's growing presence brought with it a sense of continuity, as though her influence had not faded, but simply taken on a new form. And perhaps that is where the true weight of these letters lies. They are not just reminders of what was lost, but quiet proof of what remains. In every word, there is warmth, intention, and a steady determination to give her sons more than a life defined by duty. Before the titles, before the expectations, there was a mother ensuring that two young boys would never forget how to feel, how to see, and most importantly, how to live. Princess Diana entered motherhood at just 20, determined to love on her own terms. But what drove her to challenge royal tradition, and how did her choices quietly reshape the future of the monarchy in ways few could anticipate? Let's find out. A different kind of royal mother. Long before palace walls learned to soften, a quiet shift was already unfolding inside them, one shaped not by protocol, but by a young woman determined to love differently. When Princess Diana welcomed her first son, Prince William, on June 21, 1982, she stepped into motherhood with a sense of purpose that startled even the most seasoned royal watchers. At just 20, she was not interested in tradition for tradition's sake. She was focused on connection, presence, and something far more human. Inside Kensington Palace, decisions that once belonged to generations of royal custom began to shift. Diana chose her son's name herself, an uncommon move, and even more striking was her decision to nurse him, a deeply personal act rarely embraced within royal circles. These were not grand rebellions, but they carried a quiet power. They signaled a mother unwilling to be distant in her child's life. Her determination became even clearer when duty called Prince Charles to Australia shortly after William's birth. Tradition would have kept the infant behind, surrounded by staff. Diana refused. She brought her son along, gently but firmly redefining what royal responsibility could look like. To her, motherhood was not secondary. It was central. As the years unfolded, her choices continued to ripple outward. Instead of keeping William confined to private tutors, she enrolled him in a local nursery, where ordinary routines replaced royal isolation. Onlookers were often surprised to see a princess handling school drop-offs herself. Yet for Diana, these moments mattered. They were pieces of a childhood she was carefully building, one grounded in reality rather than ceremony. With the arrival of Prince Harry, her vision only expanded. She wanted both boys to understand life beyond privilege. Trips to fast food restaurants, rides on the London Underground, and visits to theme parks became part of their upbringing. These outings were not random. They were thoughtful lessons. Even her former protection officer, Ken Worf, recalled how carefully she planned them, timing each visit to blend into everyday life as much as possible. Yet perhaps her most lasting influence came through compassion. By introducing William to places like Centrepoint, she opened his eyes to struggles far removed from palace life. These encounters were not staged gestures, they were deliberate efforts to shape perspective and responsibility. In redefining motherhood, Diana did more than break tradition. She reshaped it. Through simple, deeply human choices, she created a legacy not of distance, but of empathy. One that would quietly echo through the next generation of the royal family. Princess Diana faced a world of cold protocol and growing marital strain, yet she chose a different path. How did her quiet determination to nurture William and Harry shape a private rebellion against tradition that the public would only later glimpse? A mother beyond the crown, Diana's quiet legacy. Long before the palace walls seemed to close in, a different story was unfolding behind them. One not defined by titles or tradition, but by a mother's quiet determination to raise two boys with warmth in a world that often felt cold. As the early 1990s brought growing strain to her marriage with Prince Charles, Princess Diana turned her focus inward, finding strength not in royal duty, but in the laughter, questions, and everyday lives of her sons, William and Harry. Even as headlines grew louder and speculation deepened, Diana carefully shaped a life for her children that felt as normal as possible. She chose schools like Wetherby and Ludgrove, not for prestige alone, but for their sense of care and protection. she stayed involved, not from a distance, but in the smallest, most meaningful ways, attending school events, encouraging their interests, and even writing personal notes to those who looked after them. These gestures, simple yet thoughtful, revealed a woman who refused to let circumstance define her role as a mother. The year 1992 marked a turning point, as her separation from Charles became official. Yet, rather than retreat, Diana remained present in her sons' lives, navigating co-parenting under intense public attention. By 1995, when she spoke openly in a widely watched interview, her honesty stunned the world. Beneath the headlines, however, her message was deeply personal. She wanted her children to grow up not just as princes, but as kind, emotionally aware individuals, something she valued far more than royal expectations. Soon after, pressure from Queen Elizabeth II led to the final steps toward divorce, completed on August 28, 1996. The loss of her Royal Highness title carried an emotional weight that few could fully understand. For Diana, it was not about status, but about what it symbolized. The idea that she might one day have to bow to her own sons was deeply painful. Yet, in that moment, a young William's reported reassurance that he would restore it when he became king captured the depth of their bond, a connection built on love rather than protocol. Freed from the formal structure of royal life, Diana redirected her energy toward causes close to her heart, from supporting the homeless to raising awareness about HIV and campaigning against landmines. Still, even as her public role evolved, her private world remained centered on William and Harry. In letters and conversations, she often spoke of their personalities, William's quiet sense of responsibility and Harry's lively spirit, while expressing hopes that they would grow into independent, compassionate men. In the end, Diana's greatest influence was not tied to her title, but to the values she passed on. Through uncertain times, she offered her sons something enduring: the courage to feel deeply, the strength to stand apart, and the understanding that true legacy is not inherited. Before Princess Diana's 1995 Panorama interview stunned the world, tensions had already been brewing. What events led to her separation in 1992? And how did those early cracks begin reshaping the monarchy's carefully controlled image long before her words reached millions? A crown divided, Diana's quiet battle beyond the palace walls. In 1995, before millions sat glued to their televisions, Princess Diana spoke with a calm honesty that carried the weight of years unspoken. It reshaped how the world saw life behind palace walls. Her words were simple, yet powerful, touching deeply on loneliness, pressure, and above all, her hopes for her sons. But the story did not begin there. 3 years earlier, in 1992, the announcement of her separation from Prince Charles had already unsettled the carefully controlled image of the monarchy. Inside Kensington Palace, everything changed. The grand halls remained the same, but the atmosphere grew quieter, more uncertain. No longer bound by a shared household, Diana turned her full attention to raising Prince William and Prince Harry, who were still young and in need of reassurance. While public attention focused on royal duty and tradition, Diana chose a different path. She became deeply present in her children's lives, school runs, weekend outings, and private conversations that helped them understand a world far larger than royal expectations. She wanted them to feel, not just perform, to connect, not just represent. Then came June 29, 1994, a moment that echoed across the nation. Charles, in a televised admission, confirmed what many had long suspected: the marriage had been marked by betrayal. The revelation shook public trust, but it also set the stage for Diana's own voice to emerge more clearly. When she finally spoke in 1995, it was not with anger, but with honesty that felt both fragile and strong. The reaction within the monarchy was swift. Queen Elizabeth II, guided by senior advisors and the Archbishop of Canterbury, made a decisive move. Letters were sent, urging both Diana and Charles to bring their marriage to a formal end. What followed was not just a legal process, but a deeply emotional transition. By August 28, 1996, the divorce was finalized. The outcome carried more than legal meaning. It reshaped Diana's place in the royal structure. Though she remained the Princess of Wales, the loss of the Her Royal Highness title marked a subtle but painful shift. It was not merely about protocol. It symbolized distance, a quiet separation from the institution she had once fully belonged to. Yet beyond titles and traditions, Diana's legacy during this period was defined by something far more enduring. In the midst of public scrutiny and personal change, she redefined what it meant to be both a royal figure and a mother, choosing compassion, openness, and humanity in a world that rarely allowed such vulnerability. Princess Diana's bond with young Prince William was said to be profound, shaped by loss and promise. But what did that early connection mean for the future king, and how might it influence the choices he would make when the crown and family legacy? The final chapters of Princess Diana. Few moments capture the quiet depth of a mother's bond like the one Princess Diana is said to have shared with her eldest son, Prince William. At just 14, he reportedly saw through the composure she tried to maintain and offered a promise far beyond his years that one day, when he was king, he would restore what she had lost. Whether confirmed or not, the story lingers because it reflects something undeniable: the closeness they shared during a time when her world was quietly unraveling. By the mid-1990s, Diana's life had shifted dramatically. No longer bound by the rigid expectations of royal duty, she stepped away from more than 100 patronages, choosing instead a smaller circle of causes that spoke to her heart. Organizations like Centrepoint and Great Ormond Street Hospital became central to her work, alongside efforts supporting AIDS awareness and those affected by leprosy. This was not a retreat, but a reinvention, one that allowed her to connect more directly with people often overlooked. Yet behind that renewed sense of purpose was a growing unease. In a letter dated October 1995, later revealed by Paul Burrell, Diana expressed fears that painted a far darker picture of her reality. She wrote of danger, of feeling watched, and of a possible plot against her safety. The words were unsettling, controversial, and widely debated, but they revealed a woman who felt increasingly exposed without the structure that once surrounded her. Even in that uncertainty, her role as a mother never weakened. Her days were shaped around the lives of William and Prince Harry's school runs, meetings, small routines that grounded them all. Friends often described her as present and attentive, determined to give her sons a sense of normal life despite the extraordinary circumstances around them. In January 1997, she stepped onto one of the most dangerous landscapes in the world, Angola, alongside the International Committee of the Red Cross. Wearing protective gear, she walked through a cleared minefield, drawing global attention to the hidden dangers that lingered beneath the soil. The images traveled far, not just as photographs, but as symbols of courage and purpose. Through it all, Diana carried a simple belief, one she quietly passed on to William, that leadership should never be about power, but about service. It was a lesson shaped not by titles, but by compassion. When her life was tragically cut short on August 31, 1997 in Paris, the world stood still. The image of her sons walking behind her coffin became one of shared grief and lasting memory. Yet even in loss, her influence endured, woven into the values she had worked so hard to instill, and into the promise once spoken by a young boy who had already begun to understand her world. So, what do you think Princess Diana revealed in her lost letter to Prince William? A hidden truth or a final message? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to